I'll continue reading The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. During my last read, basically I couldn't understand anything on the first read, and later I reread them quite a number of times and did some research. And still, I don't think I fully understand it. It's quite convoluted, the entire history. Basically, it is chapter 7 prince about a prince who acquired a new kingdom, a new city by fortune, by the help of others. And then uh, Machiavelli pointed out two persons as example. The first one is Francesco Sforza. He obtained he became Duke of Milan by his own ingenuity, and therefore he had no problem to keep his power. Of course, in the first place, his entire process of becoming Duke of Milan was encountered with tremendous amount of challenges and difficulty. Then the second person Machiavelli mentioned, contrasting with Sforza, the second person he used is Cesare Borgia. And this person, Machiavelli said that he had great difficulty in keeping his power because his entire ascendancy towards the throne was quite lucky with the help of his father, Alexander the Sixth, the Pope. And uh, the entire history is quite convoluted. I check Wikipedia. Basically, Alexander the Sixth, as a pope, really wanted to help Cesare Borgia to expand his power, to get more kingdom, and as a result, because of that, Cesare Borgia obtained quite a number of cities, namely Fienza, Rimini, and also there was some part whereby I don't know whether there was certainly the participation of France into the king during the reign of Cesare Borgia. But however, I don't really know whether it was the French help Cesare Borgia or whether it was Cesare Borgia helping the the king of France. And then it seems like okay. Also, another thing is the family of Orsini and Colonnesi were involved, and it seems like the family of Colonnesi was beaten. So, in short, Cesare Borgia took quite a lot of new city, Fienza, Rimini, and also Urbino, and defeated the Colonnesi family. But later on, I checked Wikipedia. Basically, Cesare Borgia quickly lost his power after obtaining uh, the city of Urbino, which I'm not sure why. It's really, really hard to understand. Uh, okay, Machiavelli also talked about some basic ingenuity of Cesare Borgia after obtaining Romagna. Cesare Borgia basically installed a really cruel, really strict duke to lead Romagna, and as a result, a lot of robbery in that city, a lot of violence was reduced. Yeah, basically that's all. And then, yeah, not too sure. Let me continue reading to see if I could find more hint. Such was his line of action as to present affairs, but as to the future he had to fear, in the first place, that a new successor to the church might not be friendly to him and might seek to take from him that which Alexander had given him. So he decided to act in four ways. Firstly, by exterminating the families of those lords whom he had despoiled, so as to take away that pretext from the Pope. Secondly, by winning to himself all the gentlemen of Rome, so as to be able to curb the Pope with their aid as has been observed. Thirdly, by converting the college more to himself. Fourthly, by acquiring so much power before the Pope should die that he could by his own measures resist the first shock. Of these four things, at the death of Alexander he had accomplished three, for he had killed as many of the dispossessed lords as he could lay hands on, and few had escaped. He had won over the Roman gentlemen, and he had the most numerous party in the college. And as to any fresh acquisition, he intended to become master of Tuscany, for he already possessed Perugia, and Piombino and Pisa was under his protection. And as he had no longer to study France, for the French were already driven out the kingdom of Naples by the Spaniards, and in this way both were compelled to buy his goodwill. He pounced down upon Pisa. After this, Lucca and Siena yielded at once, partly through hatred and partly through fear of the Florentines, and the Florentines would have had no remedy had he continued to prosper, as he was prospering the year that Alexander died. For he had acquired so much power and reputation that he would have stood by himself and no longer have depended on the luck and the forces of others, but solely on his own power and ability. By the way, I digress. Let me digress a little. On Wikipedia of Cesare Borgia, there was an interesting anecdote, which is during his throne, he actually hired Leonardo da Vinci as his military engineer to build some military buildings or equipments. That got me into thinking, oh, interesting, because basically I checked the year of birth of both Cesare Borgia and Leonardo da Vinci. They are basically very, very close, about 1460. And that got me into thinking, all these anecdotes, all this history Machiavelli is talking about, at that point of time, Italy was already starting Renaissance. And yeah, Leonardo da Vinci, very interesting. Okay, let me continue. But Alexander died 5 years after he had first drawn the sword. He left the dukes with the state of Romagna alone consolidated, with the rest in the air between two most powerful hostile armies, and sick unto death. Yet there were in the duke such boldness and ability, and he knew so well how men are to be won or lost, and so firm were the foundations which in so short a time he had laid, that if he had not had those armies on his back, or if he had been in good health, he would have overcome all difficulties. And it is seen that his foundations were good, for the Romagna awaited him for more than a month. But in Rome, although but half alive, he remained secure, and whilst the Baglioni, the Vitelli, and the Orsini might come to Rome, they could not effect anything against him. If he could not have made Pope him whom he wished, at least the one whom he did not wish would not have been elected. But if he had been in sound health at the death of Alexander, everything would have been different to him. Oh, by the way, Cesare Borgia died because of malaria fever. I'll continue. On the day that Julius II was elected, he told me that he had thought of everything that might occur at the death of his father, and had provided a remedy for all, except that he had never anticipated that when the death did happen, he himself would be on the point to die. When all the actions of the Duke are recalled, I do not know how to blame him, but rather it appears to be, as I have said, that I ought to offer him for imitation to all those who by the fortune or the arms of others are raised to government, because he, having a lofty spirit and far-reaching aims, could not have regulated his conduct otherwise, and only the shortness of the life of Alexander and his own sickness frustrated his designs. Therefore, he who considers it necessary to secure himself in his new principality to win friends, to overcome either by force or by fraud, to make himself beloved and feared by the people, to be followed and revered by the soldiers, to exterminate those who have power or reason to hurt him, to change the old order of things for new, to be severe and gracious, to magnanimous and liberal, to destroy a disloyal soldiery, and to create new, to maintain friendship with kings and princes in such a way that they must help him with zeal and offend with caution, cannot find a more lively example than the actions of these men. Only can he be blamed the election of Julius II, in whom he made a bad choice, because, as is said, not being able to elect a pope to his own mind, he could have hindered any other from being elected pope, and he ought never to have consented to the election of any cardinal whom he had injured or who had cause to fear him if they became pontiffs. For men injured either from fear or hatred those whom he had injured, amongst others, were San Pietro at Vincula, Colonna, San Giorgio, and Ascanio. The rest, in becoming pope, had to fear him, ruin, and the Spaniards accepted, the latter from their relationship and obligations, the former from his influence. The kingdom of France having relations with him. Therefore, above everything, the Duke ought to have created a Spaniard pope, and failing him, he ought to have consented to ruin, and not San Pietro at Vincula. He who believes that new benefits will cause great personages to forget old injuries is deceived. Therefore, the Duke erred in his choice, and it was the cause of his ultimate ruin. So basically, the end of chapter 7. I'm not too sure after Cesare Borgia, the successor of Cesare Borgia, who is Julius II. I don't really know how did Julius II fall and fail. How was Julius II dethroned? I have to check the history on Wikipedia. But basically, it's a very tough chapter to read because there are way too many geographical names, too many names of cities which I'm actually not familiar with, the ancient cities of Italy. Okay, continue chapter 8, concerning those who have obtained a principality by wickedness. Although a prince may rise from a private station in two ways, neither of which can be entirely attributed to fortune or genius, yet it is manifest to me that I must not be silent on them. Although one could be more copiously treated when I discuss republics. These methods are when either by some wicked or nefarious ways one ascends to the principality, or when by the favor of his fellow citizens as a private person becomes the prince of his country. And speaking of the first method, it will be illustrated by two examples, one ancient, the other modern. And without entering further into the subject, I consider these two examples will suffice those who may be compelled to follow them. I digress. It's very interesting when Machiavelli mentioned the word modern. Obviously, he wrote this book in 15th century, and when he meant the word modern, he meant contemporary in 15th century, which to us today seems extremely ancient. I'll continue. Agathocles the Sicilian became king of Syracuse, not only from a private but from a low and abject position. This man, the son of a potter, through all the changes in his fortunes, always led an infamous life. Nevertheless, he accompanied his infamies with so much ability of mind and body that having devoted himself to the military profession, he rose through its ranks to be a praetor of Syracuse. I'll stop here, continue in another episode. See you, goodbye.